This is called the viewport, this kind of gray workspace here. So there are a couple of hotkeys that I want to show you. First of all, there's these, if I click on this little thing, this widget here, or menu here, has the 4 quadrants, we can see 4 different views. Okay, this is very helpful because when you're modeling something, you want to make sure that it looks correct from all angles. So typically we have the top, the front, the side, and perspective. Okay? So this helps us get an accurate model. Now if you hit spacebar, spacebar will actually toggle between those 2 views. Okay? So it's very, very quick if you're doing some modeling in perspective and then you want to see how it looks from those angles, you hit spacebar. Okay, that'll switch back. Okay? Now control spacebar will switch to full screen. Okay? So you see when I hit control spacebar, it gets rid of all the side panels. So this can be helpful if you want to really get into your modeling, full screen mode. Okay, a couple other hotkeys I'll show you. Now, in order to move around in our viewport, the Alt key is very important. Okay, so if we hold Alt and click and hold left mouse button, we can rotate. Okay, so give that a try. Hold Alt, click and hold left mouse button. If we hold Alt and click the middle mouse button, we can pan the view. Okay, and then hold Alt and right mouse button. That will zoom in and out. Okay, so again, that's the Alt key with the 3 mouse buttons, left, middle, right. Left mouse rotates, right zooms, middle will pan. Okay, so I'm going to go back to hit Control Space, go back to this view. Now we have this thing called the polygon shelf. I'm just going to create a cube. So clicking on the cube, that'll create it here. Now another good trick with your viewport is, say for instance we're like way over here. If you have an object selected, if you press F, that will automatically bring that into center view. Okay. Now if we're rotating, Alt left and hold, that will actually rotate around that object. Okay, so that can be very useful, especially if you're, your viewport, you're off looking at something else. You can select an object, press F to get back to it. Okay, now let's take a look at orthographic mode. So again, press spacebar. So the top, front, and side, this is referred to as orthographic. And we can also use those hotkeys here. So Alt middle will pan, and Alt right will zoom in and out. Oops. Okay. You can't rotate in orthographic because it's kind of locked to these coordinates. Okay. Okay, so let's look at some modeling basics. Okay, so what I want to do is delete this thing. So just click on it. Oh, I'm deleting faces for some reason. Okay. I'm just going to press Z. At some point along the line, I switched to a different view mode. Okay. So yeah, by the way, Z is undo, and a little bit different because a lot of programs have Control Z, but in mine it's just Z. Okay, so if you ever want to undo, you can do that. Okay, so there are two main ways of creating a polygon primitive. It's called primitive because it's just kind of a basic shape. So the first way is to go create polygon primitives, and you can select whatever you want from here. Okay, so let's try a sphere. Okay. You can press delete to delete it. Okay. Let's try that again. Polygon primitives. Let's try a cube this time. You'll notice that there's a checkbox beside it. If you press that checkbox, let's see what happens. Okay, it actually brings up some options. And we can preset the size and depth and all this stuff before it actually is created. So that can be useful if you want something of a specific size. Okay, so for instance, if I want the width to be 2, then I can apply, and that will make a shape to my specification. All right. Now the other main way of creating polygons is through the polygon shelf, and this is actually how I usually create things, because most of what I need is right at my fingertips here. I don't necessarily have to go through the menu every time. So I'll just delete that. So if I click on the sphere in the polygon shelf, it'll create a sphere. Okay. Now one thing to show you is I set my options for my cube. If I create a cube from the polygon shelf, it's actually going to create it to those settings that I had set. So just keep that in mind. I can turn that off. Okay, let's set that back to the default. Okay, so now when I create a cube, it'll be back to the regular shapes. You may have noticed another thing in here called NURBS. Okay, don't worry about NURBS for now. It's kind of used for some more advanced stuff. Okay, don't worry about it. Okay, another thing we can do is if we turn on interactive creation, this is kind of interesting. I don't use it a lot, but you might like it. So if we turn on interactive creation, if I click on a cube, for instance, it's not going to create it right away. I actually have to left click and drag to create the base. Okay? And then left click and drag again to create the height. Okay? So that's kind of interesting. As I said, I don't use it a lot, but some people might like that because it gives you a bit more interactive control over creating something. Okay, so in case you didn't realize already, left click is select. You can just press the delete key on your keyboard to delete. Okay, if we have multiple objects, I still have interactive mode on. Let's get rid of that. So I'm just going to turn interactive mode off. Okay, so if I have multiple objects, so I'm going to have this guy, and then maybe that one inside. Left click will select. If I want to select more than one object, I can actually click and drag my mouse, like a marquee. That'll select everything inside my mouse. Okay. And as I said, Z is undo. If I want to deselect something in my selection, I can hold Shift and left click. Okay, so that'll add or delete from a selection. Okay. So let's, I'll show you a few things on how to manipulate things. So we can move, scale, and rotate with these items on the toolbar. And you'll realize very quickly that there are some easy to access hotkeys. So select is Q. Okay, just like in Adobe Animate and other programs, we have that selection arrow. That's Q. W is move. Okay, so if I press W, that'll be the move tool. So if I select something with the move tool, I can move it along these axes. I can grab the middle and free move it, but that's not usually recommended because you might not know how you're moving that. Okay. The E key is rotate. And again, with rotate, you can pick one of these axes, rotate along that. That's how that works. The R key is scale. Okay, and with scale, again, we have these 3 axes, and that will scale it along that side. Okay, basically height, width, and depth. And if I grab that middle one, I can scale up the entire thing uniformly. Okay, so try each one. One thing though, I've kind of rotated my view, and I'm running out of time in my thing here, but I've rotated my view. One important thing is that when we're modeling, we want to make sure that this blue arrow down here in perspective mode is facing us. Okay, that's because when we look at orthographic view, that blue arrow is facing us. So it's always a good idea to double check that, because otherwise you could be modeling things backwards or upside down. Okay, so just be aware that that's how the orthographic views are set up. And again, that space bar to switch back. Okay.